Hi, this is Billie Jean King.
This is Marion Bartoli.
This is Bianca Andreescu.
I'm Mats Wilander.
This is Mary Carrillo.
This is Pam Schreiber.
This is Yannick Noah, and you're listening to the Tennis Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Tennis Podcast, the first of 18 daily tennis podcasts from Roland Garros 2025, which is exactly where you find us. Myself, Catherine Whittaker, Matt Roberts, David Law. We are in Paris. We are at Roland Garros, where we are in the shadow of Court Philippe Chatrier. The hubbub you can hear around us is Parisians enjoying the penultimate day of qualifying. It's a beautiful day in Paris. We are thrilled to be here. Today is and was draw day for Roland Garros 2025. It is, I feel like, Matt, I should say congratulations as if it's your wedding day or something. Matt Roberts clad here in his very favourite outfit for one of his very favourite days of the year.
Truly one of the best days of the year, and I think it lived up to expectations. There's a real sense of occasion about the French Open draw at the Orangerie here at Roland Garros. It was packed. The sun came out for us. It's just been a great day, and we've also got some big fun headlines from the draw to get into as well.
We do. Lots of fun stuff to talk about, David. I generally love the French Open draw. I had a really good experience. I always do. I love experiencing draws with Matt.
Me too.
Because the energy rubs off on me. But there is one element to the French Open draw that I don't enjoy at all, and that's when an automated computer starts filling in the names on the lines, and some weird music plays in the background. And I started exclaiming and spluttering about this, and Matt shot me a look as if to say, don't you get down on this draw. Not while you're in my vicinity.
Don't kill my buzz.
And then afterwards he walked out and he said, I didn't have a problem with the music.
No, I did have a problem with the interview with Dembele, the French and PSG footballer, during the middle of the women's draw. After they'd done the electronic naming of the non-seeds, they then just had an interview in the middle of the draw. That was a blow. Otherwise, really good draw.
I was just relieved that Ousmane Dembele wasn't being asked to do the analysis of the women's draw. Which is, there was one moment where I thought that was what was going to be happening. The women's draw, I feel like, is where we should start here, and more specifically with the defending champion, the four-time champion Iga Swiatek's draw, because this is where my gasps came from, my personal oohs and ahs. Matt was diligently note-taking throughout this draw, and I saw you write the words, Matt, murder row next to Iga Swiatek's name. And I don't think that is hyperbole. I think this is a nightmarish draw for Swiatek at a time when that is not what she needs.
Yeah, it's very, very hard to disagree with that. I think the main reason it's a nightmare is that the one name she didn't want to see come out in her section, and to be honest, I'm not sure she has seen it yet. You know, we know that she doesn't look at draws. She was at the draw, but she was not there while the draw was being made. She came after it, had gone from the screens. I don't think she knows yet, but the news is that Ostapenko, who has beaten her every single time they've played, is in her section, a potential fourth-round opponent. So that in itself is a bit of a nightmare, you know. But then when you add in the other names that have come out in her draw, collectively it looks really, really hard as well. I mean, I've had a bit of a theory going that Swiatek gets the same draw very often. You know, we do talk about Ostapenko, we talk about Noskova and Collins, and actually looking at rounds 1 and 2, she's got Shramkova in round 1, probably to face Emma Raducanu in round 2. And look, that sounds pretty tough as well. She did play both of them at the Australian Open and beat them both very, very straightforwardly. But obviously we know she's in a worse place now in terms of her form. And then Marta Kostyuk is a potential third round opponent, and she's been showing great form on the clay as well. So those first 3 rounds are not sort of traditional game styles that would really trouble Swiatek. And any other year at Roland Garros, I would be looking at those first 3 rounds, not at all worried on Iga Swiatek's behalf. But this is a different year, and those names do pop out a little bit as all being a bit tricky. And of course the big headline is round 4, Ostapenko.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent a lot of time with Matt over the last 24 hours, lucky me, and, you know, Matt wants to talk about the draw a lot, which is great. You know, what are you hoping to see in the draw? You know, what are your ideal scenarios? Occasionally he brings up
I can't think of any.
Fulham beating Brentford away on Saturday, but mostly it's draw anticipation chat. And look, I'm here for it. But really, I've only been able to give one answer, and that's I just want to see Ostapenko in Swiatek's section. I just want to test this theory, to test the robustness of the most fascinating head-to-head in the sport right now. And look, I know it's pointless to throw ahead to a 4th round match that might not happen, especially when one of the players required to win through 3 rounds is Jelena Ostapenko. But we got our wish, didn't we? I think every neutral wanted to see those 2 names come out in the same section. And look, just to elaborate a bit on what Matt was saying there, projected, you know, best guess at matches for Iga Swiatek at this tournament: Shramkova round 1, Emma Raducanu round 2, Marta Kostyuk round 3. Okay, Swiatek always beats Kostyuk, but I feel like this is the best version of Kostyuk we've ever seen, and one of the worst or shakiest versions of Swiatek in recent years. Round 4 would be Ostapenko or Elena Rybakina, who's out of form but has caused Swiatek problems in the past. Quarterfinal would be Paolini, and I'm not listing these other names because I don't think Paolini's going to get there. I'm not underestimating
you
her.
Underestimated her in the agenda by putting slashes.
No, you've got to put Svitolina in a slash, in a bracket. But no, scheduled quarterfinal opponent, according to Seeds and the Tennis Podcast, is Jasmine Paolini. But Noskova, Svitolina, Vekic are all in that section as well. And then the semi-final opponent would be Aryna Sabalenka. It's hellish, David.
I don't really think you could have written a worse draw on paper for her. Maybe if you put Bencic in the first round rather than Shramkova, who I think Shramkova in herself is a very dangerous player, a very good player. There are a heck of a lot of better first round draws you could have had than that. But at the same time, you know, you would still think Swiatek would win that. But I mean, I'm with you. I want to see her eventually play Ostapenko because of the sheer fascination about which wins out. Is it the incredible record of Swiatek here at the French Open at Roland Garros, or is it the head-to-head between the 2 of them? But there's such a long way for them to go to get there, because you mentioned Swiatek's route. I mean, Ostapenko finding a way past most likely either Rybakina or Bencic, that is not straightforward. And frankly, she hasn't been in very good form since she beat Swiatek a few weeks ago and won that title. So it may not happen. Our fun may be ruined. But here's hoping.
I won't ask for a prediction for a match that might not happen, but I will ask you both whether that match will happen.
I'm feeling optimistic. I'm going to say yes.
David?
I think it's going to happen too. I also really entertained by the way that Swiatek walked into that room looking really fresh and positive. You would not know from her body language that she's had a terrible run.
Because a 4. I thought you meant in the draw. Because she definitely... It's interesting, on the draw, we'll come on to talk about the men's and Carlos Alcaraz in part 2, but there was an incredible moment at the draw with Alcaraz came for the men's section and he hung around afterwards and he was stood at the front for a long time. He was still there when we left the room, gazing up at the big screen that had the draw on.
He's more
analysing
into the draw than I am.
Yeah, he was and his agent
bond.
came and joined him and he was pointing up at it, you know, really taking it in, looking for Bertik van der Zandschulp's name. I've never seen anything like that before. It's just so public as well, like hundreds of people standing around. He doesn't mind being seen doing this, whereas Iga Swiatek, I'm fairly sure she or her people would have briefed that the draw needs to be not on the screen when I come into the room, because it was looming behind Carlos Alcaraz the whole time that he was on the stage, and it had gone when Iga Swiatek was in there. And look, that's not news. We know that she doesn't like to know the draw. David found out the hard way last year.
No, that was Osaka.
Oh, was it?
Yes, but I think that applies to many players. You know, you've got to really tread carefully when you suggest to a player that, have you seen, what about your third round draw potentially? And they're like, oh my goodness me, shut that down. But no, I suppose pre-tournament you're full of hope anyway, aren't you? And I do wonder whether Swiatek has come back here and felt different because she's walked through the gates here as opposed to Rome or Madrid or wherever else it is. This is Roland Garros. This is where she's had her very best moments. She looked happy to be here. But if she does, I wonder whether she looks at this draw at all. You know, because I think probably the best thing for her is to just literally do the old cliche of one at a time. But yeah, it's a rough one.
It's interesting. I mean, that was the question that Matt Futterman put to her after her defeat in Rome, wasn't it? You know, okay, you're in a bit of a trough right now, but do you think there's a chance you just get to Roland Garros and the vibes and the muscle memory of being there spark something in you? And she didn't take kindly to that question. Okay, she was in a tough headspace at the moment, but she didn't say, yeah, that's exactly what I'm hoping for and expecting. So Sabalenka, obviously, this is the top half of the draw we're talking about. Sabalenka is the top seed. She's at the top of the top half. The draw's fine for her early on. She's got Rakimova round 1, round 2 looks fine, round 3 most likely fine. But there's a potential Clara Tauson or Amanda Anisimova in round 4, which I'm sure is something very much on your mind, Matt.
Absolutely. Amanda Anisimova, of course, who's generally had a good record against Sabalenka, you know, has beaten her here, in fact. I know that was a long time ago, but there's something about the way that Anisimova can turn Sabalenka's power back on her, which is really, really compelling in that rivalry. Obviously, Sabalenka would be the favourite, you know, for sure. But I just think Anisimova is a name that Sabalenka would be a little bit wary of, and Tauson as well. You know, has had tough matches against Sabalenka too. So, yeah, I would maybe circle Danielle Collins in round 3 as well. Like, I would be backing Sabalenka in that matchup if they met. But it's a name. So yes, like easy start for Sabalenka, I think, but then could get complicated, and then the quarterfinal opponent, I was really pleased to see this come out in the draw as well, because it tests another theory, and in particular it tests David's theory that Zheng's win over Sabalenka the other week doesn't mean anything.
Meaningless.
Correct.
Because Zheng is the, you know, possible quarterfinal opponent by seeding for Sabalenka. And look, it's so fascinating how things can change in your mind, because if I had seen that draw without their match the other week, I'd have been like, oh, I know what happens in that rivalry. That's the one to the top seed I didn't really want Sabalenka to play. But because Zheng has got that win, it instantly makes it so much more fascinating as a prospect. So I'm really, really excited about that too. Like, this draw is so top heavy. You know, Sabalenka and Swiatek coming out in the same half, but then on top of that, having Zheng, who won the Olympics here last year, Paolini, who's coming in the best form in terms of having just won Rome. Like, all of those names are in this top half.
Yeah, looking at the bottom half, I've basically in the notes here written good draw for every major name and seed, pretty much. Andreeva's at the top of the bottom half. It's a great draw for her, I think. Sorry, Reggie, Christina Buksha in round 1. Jessica Pegula, her scheduled quarter-final opponent, which, with due respect to her, she was of the top 4 seeds. She was the one you would have wanted as your quarter-final opponent. Coco Gauff is the second seed at the bottom. Great draw for her. I mean, the big seed in her section is Barbora Krejcikova.
Yeah, such unknowns. I mean, we haven't seen her play hardly, have we?
No, I mean, there's Katerina Alexandrova is in Coco Gauff's section, who is having a great year. She's currently top 10 in the race, isn't she? But she tends to underperform at slams, Alexandrova. So hard to see that as a really significant threat to Coco Gauff. And then Madison Keys, the scheduled quarter-final opponent for Coco Gauff, fantastic draw for her too, I think. I mean, Sofia Kenin, Emma Navarro, Haddad Maia, the seeds in her section. I mean, if Keys hits any kind of form, it's hard to see her not progressing, really. I mean, yeah, it is. I didn't quite realise it as the names were coming out in the draw live in the room, but sitting down, as I have done over the last hour, and really digesting it, I've realised exactly how top-heavy this draw is.
It really is. Do you think that Putintseva could cause Andreeva issues in the third round? I just sort of think I haven't really thought about what sort of form Putintseva's in, but I do think it's exactly the sort of match she'd kind of relish, seeing if she can make the young, exciting star of the sport throw her toys out the pram a bit.
It would be quite stompy, that match, wouldn't it?
I'm really hoping it happens.
You're right. I think Putintseva would rise to that kind of occasion. She's not in anything like the form she was in 12 months ago. Putintseva is the only thing. It's some interesting round ones. Paula Badosa and Naomi Osaka, Ava Lees and Peyton Stearns. Matt found that exciting. I'm not sure. Many people found that hugely thrilling, but Matt's mentioned it several times.
They were both members of my fantasy team, but I did actually swap Lease out for Collins during our recent trade and transfer window. But as we know, Stearns is winning the French Open, so that's why I've highlighted that one.
She's in the Zheng Qinwen section, incidentally, Peyton Stearns, as is Diana Schneider. Do we think we'll get Zheng Sabalenka?
I'm not convinced, actually. Like, I do hope so, for the reasons I've said, but the two names you've just picked out, Stearns and Schneider, I think would be real tests for Zheng.
I'm going to say yes. I think she is so well set up here at Roland Garros. You know, this is a player who's won Olympic gold here. I feel like the clay and the air and the way the ball flies through the air, I think this might be her best chance to have a really big run at a Grand Slam.
I think we should highlight her round one. Former finalist Pavlyuchenkova.
Good point, yeah.
I know she's not in the form that she used to be in, but, you know, another someone who loves the conditions here. And if Pavlyuchenkova just has a day where the ball striking is just there, that would be tricky, I think. But, yeah, I do back Zheng.
Anything else of interest in this women's draw? I feel like it's incredibly well set up for great sort of third, fourth round onwards matches. There weren't many fascinating first rounds that jumped out. Obviously that Badosa Osaka, Bencic-Rybakina is the other one too. Yeah,
I sort of just hope everybody's fit in those matches, because obviously Badosa's had so many issues. Bencic, I think, pulled out of a tournament recently. I just want to see these matches happen and be good, you know, because these are players that have had major moments in their careers, and I want to see them, you know, it's the benefit of them having had difficulties recently is suddenly they meet in the first round, and I think that can be something that lights up the first couple of days of a Grand Slam.
Speaking of toys out the pram, folks, if Swiatek Ostapenko doesn't happen, just going to mark your card now. It's going to be a tough pod day.
Yeah, that is the risk of the draw, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like the carrot has been dangled there in front of you now.
Yeah.
There's no excuse.
Yeah, and Ostapenko, famously not reliable.
I don't want my happiness resting on Jelena Ostapenko. Come on.
What do you think? Do you think it's happening? I mean, based on, you know, those three players that Swiatek might end up having to play as well.
I feel the same as Matt. I'm in optimistic mood, so I'm going to say yes. And I also think for Ostapenko, that carrot is huge. You know, I think since winning Stuttgart, she's been Son's carrot, hasn't she? Now, Ostapenko is 100% looking at the draw. She knows she exists to play Iga Swiatek and it totally embraces that narrative. And I think that's the boost that she needs. It's a carrot for us. It's a carrot for her. It's a big carrot, like Jannik Sinner.
Segue to the men's draw?
Yes, that's it for part one. Join us in part two for the men's draw. Welcome back to the Tennis Podcast, where we are full of the joys of Parisian spring. We've chatted about the women's draw. Time now to look at the men's. I feel like we should start with Carlos Alcaraz, even though he's not the top seed, just because he was there. He's the defending champion. There was that incredible moment of him gazing up at the screen, just looking disgustingly relaxed, wearing an all-black tracksuit, maybe inspired by Jannik Sinner's Johnny Cash vibes in Rome. Some very colourful sliders or shoes of some jazzy description. What do we think he was making of his draw as he was gazing up at it?
Do you know, I think there's a world where his draw is difficult. I just don't know if we're in that world. Because he's got Kei Nishikori in the first round. You know, obviously an incredibly talented player with pedigree. But, you know, what is he now? Down in the 60s in the world, Nishikori. He's way past his prime. He did just retire in a match against Khachanov. So, is it that tricky? I don't think so. There's then a potential Fabian Marozsan in the second round who has beaten Carlos Alcaraz before. And, you know, we know that he's great with drop shots and he likes an upset, Marozsan.
He was a handful for Fonseca the other day, wasn't he?
Right. So,
all right, there's no need to bring that up.
He's a dangerous name. Is he dangerous, though, over 5 sets against Carlos Alcaraz at a slam? I'm less convinced by that. There's then potential third round Mpeshi Perikar, who, look, is not in good form at all, but it's just a nightmare if he's having a really good day on serve. And then a potential fourth round opponent for him is, well, either Ben Shelton or Stefanos Tsitsipas, who, again, are names where in a previous version of this tournament, we might well have talked about them as being tricky. We know Alcaraz likes to match up with Tsitsipas. Tsitsipas isn't in great form. So that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, there's names here who potentially spell danger. I just don't know if they spell danger for Alcaraz now at this tournament. But what we say about Alcaraz all the time is you've always got to be a little bit wary of an Alcaraz poor performance, and if one of those comes, these are the sorts of players who might be able to take advantage. But I don't look at this draw and think I'm really worried for Carlos Alcaraz.
David apparently is worried about him against Kei Nishikori in round one.
He was.
Do you know what? Talking about testing theories and records, wouldn't it be great to see both of them in a fifth set?
See,
because they've both got these incredible fifth set records.
Yeah, no,
in very different. They've achieved them in very different ways.
It would be fascinating. I do think if they ended up in that situation, look, the smart money is that then Alcaraz's physicality just takes over. But why would he be in a fifth set against Nishikori unless he's not playing as well as he should be? And Nishikori does get better in a fifth set. He's just simple as. I mean, you ask him about it and he doesn't seem able to explain it. You know, I specifically did in Australia, and he couldn't give me a reason that I could understand as to why he's got this incredible fifth set record. But so I suspect, though, that Alcaraz will actually just come out and the surface suits him so much better than it does Nishikori. He's so much younger and, frankly, better. He should be fine. Second round, I think Marozsan is a problem because that guy can play. I've watched a lot of him this last couple of months. His game is more than drop shots. You know, that was the headline when he beat Alcaraz in Rome. That was the thing that made you sort of double take, because hold on, which one's which here? They all, from afar, they look quite similar. They got the same haircut. They're both hitting an absurd amount of drop shots, and actually Marozsan's hitting them better. But watching Marozsan the last couple of months, the carrot stick snap sound that you often refer to, Catherine, about a clean tennis ball hit, Marozsan has got that. The ball comes out of the centre of his racket on both sides. I think the forehand can break down. It's quite unwieldy in the take-back. But when he gets it right, it explodes off the strings like an arrow being shot. The backhand is super reliable looking. I think he is a dangerous customer. I suspect over 5, and Alcaraz can work that out, even if Marozsan has a good day. But I don't suspect that that's an automatic straight sets win.
And just on potential fourth round opponents for Carlos Alcaraz, Tsitsipas or Shelton. Tsitsipas has Etcheverry round 1 and Shelton has Sonego.
Yeah.
They could both lose
tricky.
those.
Yeah.
Etcheverry is... I think of him as a really good clay courter, but actually looking at his record the last couple of months, he really hasn't won many matches this year, Etcheverry. But... You know, of all the first-round draws you could have, he'd probably not be one you'd choose. And
he is going strong in Hamburg, Etcheverry. You know, he's beaten Comesanya, who's had a pretty good clay court season. He just beat Lehechka today. He's into the semis in Hamburg, which, again, you can take two ways, can't you? Like, he is coming into form, but, you know, for Etcheverry, probably really desperate to win Hamburg. You know, like that might be his priority in a way at this stage. Now he's got himself to the semis. Like, it might actually be a benefit for Tsitsipas that he's playing all these matches and, you know, maybe a little bit distracted by that.
I want to go and see Shelton Sonego, wherever that is, by the way.
I think that's a problem for Shelton.
That's going to be a show. They're going to be one-upping each other.
And Sonego was involved in a show on Longland last year, wasn't he, against Humbert, and won it.
That's right.
Crazy. Australian Open quarter-final, Shelton Sonego. At the very next slam, it comes out in round 1.
Oof. That's why you love draws, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, it's the best.
Staying with the bottom half, Fritz Musetti is the projected quarter-final from this quarter, and a possible Musetti-Rune round 4, which is on my wish list of projected things that I'd like to become real things.
What a fun list.
It was a list of 1 for now.
And I think...
Matt's got his Thomas Mahatch face on about the Rune line.
Well, I think my take
Thomas
for this...
Mahatch can't finish a tennis match, David. Thomas Mahatch is not entering the conversation. How many retirements in the last year, Matt?
I think it's something like 8 since the US Open. I can't remember whether that includes withdrawals as well or just mid-match retirements, but in short, a lot.
Yeah, as you were.
I think my take from this quarter is that obviously Fritz is the highest seed in it, but it feels like the Musetti quarter. You know, this I said the other day, Musetti has reached the semis of all of the big clay court events this season, and I think he's got the draw to do it again here. You know, I think if he'd drawn Sinner or Alcaraz as his quarterfinal opponent, it's hard to really make a strong case that he could reach the semis because of them. But with this draw, I really do think the semis are on for Musetti here. Partly because I know there's Holger Rune lurking, but a lot of the other big seeds in this section are the Americans who don't like the clay so much. Fritz, Mickelson, Korda, Tiafoe, Nakashima. That's a nightmare draw at the US Open, but it's kind of a dream draw at Roland Garros, and I really do think that Musetti's coming through this. Yeah,
add in Fritz's physical state. I mean, he's sort of technically fit, but just not quite right. He's got an ab issue, hasn't he? And it's affecting his serve, and just he's just sort of a few % off, and, you know, game of fine margins and all that. It's enough to be significant.
He lost a tie-break recently, a tie-break and a match against Marcus Giron. And I'm thinking, you know, Taylor Fritz, I feel like he's got levels that are limitations for him. When he faces Sinner, when he faces Alcaraz, I think, you know, he usually then comes unstuck. But I never think of him as the guy who's going to lose a tie-break to a guy like Giron, quite honestly, as well as he's playing this spring. So something definitely not right.
He's got Daniel Altmaier round 1. You know, that's not...
Beaten Sinner here
a couple of years ago, not, you know, recent past. I think that's potentially tricky. And Bertik van der Zandschulp, incidentally, is in this section, and he's got a wild card in round 1, so absolute nightmare for him.
He wanted
He was
Alcaraz.
hoping for Alcaraz.
Put
He
me online,
he got
127.
Yeah,
please,
he got
next to
Emilio
Alcaraz.
Nava. Nightmare. Heading to the top half then.
You've skipped over Casper Ruud. not even mentioned him.
That was a genuine accident.
What were you going to say?
Look, there's his name. I wrote it in. Can you verify, David? It's
I can
there.
see it, yeah. But you missed it.
It actually says Ruud/Paul quarter-final.
Yeah, and that's for Alcaraz.
Yes.
Yeah, I just think we should mention, because look,
You're absolutely...
that's one.
Have you been sitting there for the past 10 minutes thinking, is she going to mention Casper Ruud?
I think that on most podcasts we do. No, but that's the two winners of the big clay court events in the same quarter of the draw there. Ruud and Alcaraz have been the dominant forces in terms of winning the big titles on clay this swing, and they've both landed in the same quarter. And I think we probably get that match in the quarterfinals.
Tommy Paul?
Possibly. But I think I'm backing Ruud over Paul.
I think I'm backing Ruud as well. I've got making up to do. I think we'll get Ruud Alcaraz, and I actually don't think that'll be that straightforward for Alcaraz.
No, I think Alcaraz would win, but not straightforward.
Have they played since their US Open final? If they had, I don't remember it.
No.
Am I allowed to move on past Casper Ruud now?
Absolutely.
Okay. David, anything to say about Casper Ruud?
Only that I kind of want to speak to him when I'm loitering.
Well, the request is in.
Yeah,
so
I know. I hope to get to.
The loitering is tomorrow, by the way, folks.
Yeah.
And I think we should find out any minute which loitering requests have been accepted. So we'll let you know. Watch this space. Heading to the top half of the draw, which of course is where we find the top seed, Jannik Sinner. Bumped into him earlier, almost walked dead into him as he was making his way to the Lavazza stand for some sort of sponsor appearance. There was an ooh-la-la when he drew a Frenchman in round one, Artur Rinderknecht of bicycle kick retirement fame. And he'll have a Frenchman in round two as well, Richard Gasquet or Terence Atman.
Yes.
Look, I don't think any of those Frenchmen are going to be a problem, but I do expect the tournament will get very excited about those matches.
I was trying to work out whether the bigger ooh-la-la was the fact that Gasquet had drawn Atman, or whether it was the fact that Rinderknecht was against
I think
Sinner.
it was the cluster of Frenchmen,
the first
right?
three names out of the men's draw were all French. They just couldn't contain
And
themselves.
it deserved, Jaws music, but in fact it was weird lift music.
Terence Atman is such a troll.
Yeah, yes, he is.
That's a very funny first round draw for Gasquet.
Why is he funny?
He just is such a disruptor on court. You would like him, I think.
I
Dave.
he's
I
a
can't
wind-up.
picture him. I need to go and watch him.
Incidentally, Gasquet's a big story here, isn't he? Kind of bigger than I anticipated.
They
Gasquet
led the
retiring.
draw chat with
Gasquet and Nicolas Mahut. Wouldn't have been my editorial choices, but there we go.
I did see some slightly concerning footage of Gasquet practicing the other week with an injury.
Is it all a bit Nadal at the Davis Cup? Yeah. Okay. Just in terms of Sinner, Jiri Lehečka is a possible round three opponent, as is Alejandro Davidovich Fokina. Possible Rublev or Artur Fils in round four, and then Jack Draper would be his quarterfinal opponent. I think there's a few names in there which could be bothersome for Jannik Sinner.
It's a bit like the Sabalenka draw, isn't it? I think a kind start, albeit with the caveat of French players, but I'm not sure that's a problem for Sinner. But then, as you said, I think it's tricky from the third round onwards if he has to play Davidovich Fokina, Fils, Draper. I think that's tricky.
Lehečka's a bit of a dormant volcano, I feel, just to borrow a Matt-ism. I know he's done stuff, but his level of talent, I feel like there's stuff coming from him at some point. It has to. He just hasn't quite done it yet. But I think he's got potential to be a problem. Davidovich Fokina, I could see him playing a heroic 4 or 5 setter against Sinner, but just inevitably losing it.
Yeah.
A match that's tight on paper, but actually has no feeling of jeopardy whatsoever.
And I also think that there is the potential of him just really not showing up and getting totally blown out. Because, I mean, the last couple of weeks, he's suddenly seems to have lost his form, having been so good in Monte Carlo, etc. But when you look at Sinner's draw, and generally when I look at him, it's not about rankings, is it? It's about who he's actually playing against. Because there's certain players that, if he ended up playing de Minaur, as good a player as de Minaur is, I don't really give de Minaur a chance. But if he plays against Davidovich Fokina, Lehechka in the 3rd round, if he played against Artur Fils in the 4th round, these are players that I think could discomfort him.
Is Artur Fils getting to the 4th round, David?
I think he is. I think he is. He's got...
Never won a match here before.
I think he is. He's got Nicolas Jarry in the 1st round, and it's the right year to face Jarry, isn't it? If it was a year ago...
Very tennis podcast-coded match. And,
I mean, a year ago, Jarry's a heavy favourite in that match, and now Fils is a heavy favourite in that match. So I think he wins.
Just staying on Fils for a moment, just picking up on a talking point that I raised to try and pass some time in an incredibly long taxi journey from Charles de Gaulle to our apartment yesterday through heavy traffic, while the 3 of us were crammed into an incredibly tight space.
And I don't do tight spaces very well.
Artur Fils on the men's side, and kind of, they don't really have any female contenders for the title here. Artur Fils is the man for France. Mahut and Gasquet aside, Artur Fils is kind of the man, and yet it's this weird situation where he's never won a match here. But he is in a different bracket to any time previously coming into Roland Garros. Do you think he can, A, kind of carry all of that, and B, is he the man enough that... Will he carry a night session on his own? Will Fils Jarry be scheduled at night?
I think not. I think he would need to... I think if he played...
They are men, so
Rublev.
That's
if he
obviously a
played
help.
Rublev in the 3rd round, I think that could end up being...
But you think he still needs to play another significant player to carry a session on his own, even
I think if there are very few alternatives on the given night, he might. But the fact that you've got Sinner, the fact that you've got Djokovic, and even Zverev has played numerous night sessions here. I think they go for the big name first of all. I mean, frankly, I think even if he played Rublev, that would end up somewhere else even maybe not even on the court. Might be a long lane match, which would be absolutely fine by me.
It'd be great if they scheduled Gasquet at Man at night, wouldn't it? Because we could totally ignore it and record early and go out for dinner.
Now I'm interested in that man.
No, David, we'll record without you.
I think Jaume Munar is just worth highlighting in Fis's draw.
He's had a weird season, hasn't he? Because he was awesome on hard courts, and you thought, wow, imagine him taking this form onto clay, and sort of hasn't been as good on clay. But there's no doubt he's been on the scene this year in a way he never has previously.
Yeah, I mean, look, he absolutely took Shelton apart in Rome, didn't he? I think that was perhaps a bit more on Shelton. He's had a really tough time against Casper Ruud this year, Jaume Munar, but actually he's been good against a lot of other top players. I would back Fils. I just think it's a little bit tricky when you're looking at a guy who's never won a match here.
I think the other thing is we don't yet know how Fils manages the energy levels of playing here. And the 5-set format. I still think back to our chat with Ivan Ljubicic in Australia, where Ljubicic pointed out to us that he's yet to win a straight sets best of 5-set match, and I think that remains the case. He needs to be doing that. He needs to handle in the 1st round Nicolas Jarry relatively comfortably, and not expend. It's not that he's not fit enough. He's one of the fittest looking guys around. But the emotional energy of playing in front of this crowd who are going to be so into him, and it's gives him the potential to have that turbo boost when he really needs it. But that's what he's got to save it for. The big come-ons, the noise, everything else, he needs that when he's playing against Rublev and it's 5-all. Or when he's playing against Sinner and he's keeping it close on his serve, etc., and then in the tiebreak. But he's only going to do that by learning and experiencing it, I suspect.
Just staying with this top quarter for another moment. Jack Draper, the scheduled quarter-final opponent for Sinner. Do we think we'll see that? I mean, in this section we've got Jakub Mensik and we've got João Fonseca, who has drawn Hubert Hurkacz in round one. David, how do we feel about that?
Don't feel great on a Fonseca perspective about that.
And I can't believe it's me that's doing this and not you, but can I pitch to you that that's potentially quite a good draw? It just feels a bit like Rublev round one in Australia. It'll get a big court.
The thing is,
it's a big enough scene that it's a big enough seed and name that it'll. I mean, I don't think Fonseca needs any firing up, but that'll be a big win next to his name, but it's still winnable. Like Fonseca, I don't know. I know Hurkacz was a quarter-finalist in Rome, wasn't he? But he looks physically pretty frail to me at the moment, and I don't know. I'm not sure that's the worst draw. Like he's been losing.
I'm not as convinced as you.
On outside courts to Fabian Marozsan, Fonseca.
Yeah, the manner of his losses, Fonseca, in the last couple of weeks, his game has looked loose. It's looked as though he doesn't really know where the shots are going with any regularity, and so he needs to get that under control.
The last time I saw Hubert Hurkacz at Roland Garros, he was asking to change the lady.
Yeah, what a tournament Hurkacz had last year. Permanent state of suspendu, followed by change the lady.
And that was the pigeon match, wasn't it? Where a pigeon was rescued mid-match, wasn't it?
Wasn't Medvedev involved in that?
Oh, he was, yeah. It was the same court, yeah. Maybe the same day.
A lot happened last
It was
year.
the same day.
A lot happened. And then Hurkacz retired match point down in Wimbledon. What a summer.
Yeah. Draper, by the way, playing Bellucci in round one. Remember Rotterdam?
Oh, he was
when
fun.
you got very into Bellucci?
Yes.
Yes. And forgot about him thereafter. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Look, there's a lot of matches there that in that little section that I would like to see. Like, I'd like to see de Minaur Mensik, and I would like to see the winner of that play either a Draper or a Fonseca. There's some fun names in that little section, I think.
I would really like to see Draper Sinner, because
even with the friendship thing.
Well, that's why I want to see it. Because Draper is. I mean, I've always believed in his fangs, but he has sharpened them this year. There's such a steel and a drive and a ruthlessness about him. And I know he's got a lot of friends on tour. He's a popular guy, but he does seem to have this particular bond with Jannik Sinner. He went for this training block with him right before Sinner's comeback in Rome, didn't he? And I did just raise a bit of an eyebrow at that. Like, that's the sort of thing that Federer and Nadal used to do with youngsters, isn't it? I don't know. It felt like Draper was. I know he benefited from it as well, but it felt like Draper was playing the role there of helping Sinner fine-tune himself for his comeback, and Draper's not that guy anymore. And yet I can imagine that the dynamics in that relationship, and I'm totally guessing here, but I can imagine they're such that if Jannik Sinner calls him and says, "Do you want to come and train with me for a week?" he feels like can't say no to that. It's too good an offer to refuse. So I just want to see what that matchup looks like vibe-wise now that Draper has ascended to a different plane.
Yeah.
In the tennis world.
I can't go along with you because that would mean Artefis had lost. So,
yes.
And title winner Fonseca.
Yeah, that is where I thought you were going with that sentence,
well, that's
David.
the thing, you see, it's going to be a Fonseca against Fils match, isn't it? So
maybe. Turning our attention to the second quarter of the men's draw, so the bottom of the top half, if you will. This is where we find Alexander Zverev, last year's beaten finalist, and it's where we find Novak Djokovic. They would be projected quarter-final opponents for one another. Novak Djokovic has Mackenzie McDonald round 1 and David Corentin Moutet in round 2.
This has to happen. I had not realised that was a potential until about 4 seconds ago. Moutet against Djokovic here in Paris. Oh, my word. Cancel everything else.
Do you remember when Moutet was 5-love up on Jannik Sinner?
Distinctly.
Here.
And that was the worst part of his week, because that was on court Philippe Chatrier. I want to see him elsewhere.
Well, the problem is Moutet Djokovic would be on Chatrier.
That's true.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'll take it.
Oh, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a shame that can't be scheduled.
Imagine
Yeah.
if they just
Someone
slotted
else.
that onto Longland.
The fun. Apart from that, though, I feel like it's not a bad draw for Djokovic through to the quarters. Mackenzie McDonald, Shapovalov round 3.
Yeah.
Medvedev's the big-ish seed in there.
Yeah, agreed. I think this is a good draw for Djokovic. I don't really have more analysis to do on that. I just think up until the quarters there, and if he does make it to the quarters, you'd have thought that he would have found something resembling form. Yeah, I think this is a good draw for him.
And in terms of who you might play in that quarter, I mean, obviously it's seeded to be Alexander Zverev, but he's having a torrid time form-wise. We'll talk a little bit about what's been going on in Hamburg and other events this week in part 3. But Lerner TN round 1 for Zverev, Felix Auger-Aliassime round 3, and the biggest deal of all, the biggest problem of all here, Francisco Cerundolo, potentially round 4, David.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if he does end up playing against Cerundolo, that is pretty much as bad as it can get in the fourth round, I think, for Alexander Zverev, because he has a 0-3 record against the guy, and he doesn't show any real signs of having got to grips with his game. And even in the first round, Lerner TN is the opponent of Zverev, a guy who beat Zverev as part of this terrible run he's been on just a few weeks ago in Acapulco. I do think it's a different match on clay at Roland Garros. I don't think Lerner TN's game necessarily works as well as it does on a hard court, but he's such a clever player. He's the sort of guy who could find the Zverev forehand and make life difficult if Zverev's not like bang on it from ball one. But even when you look through that little section, Jesper de Jong has got a game that has disrupted players in the past, and Auger-Aliassime is the potential third round opponent for Zverev, or it could be Matteo Arnaldi. And I'd also give a little nod to Flavio Cobolli, who's got a good clay court game. You know, that's not an easy draw anyway for Zverev, but given his form at the moment, I really think he's going to have to go some to come through and end up playing against Djokovic.
And we'll talk more about that form, as I say, in part 3. Just to wrap up the draws, has anything we've seen today in these draws changed how you feel about who's winning these titles and reaching the finals?
That's a really good question. I think before the draw I would have said Alcaraz and Sabalenka as my winners, and I don't think I've seen anything that changes that. Maybe I'm pausing a little bit on Sabalenka just because she's in that tough half. I think it's a great draw for Gauff. Like, it's probably my biggest takeaway there. Like, away from Sabalenka, away from Paolini, away from Swiatek, just in a section to do her thing. And you know, she's reached 2 finals this year on the clay, lost them both. I think my takeaway from the draw is that I'm going to be thinking that Coco Gauff reaches the final, and I'm not sure I would have been like that. Felt a bit draw dependent to me, whereas the winners maybe less so. So I think Gauff reaching the final is kind of what I've concluded from this draw.
And the men's?
The men's, I'm still taking look, it's hard to look at anything other than Alcaraz Sinner still for me. But I'm pausing a little bit more on Sinner than I thought I might. I thought I might just be going Sinner. He's so reliable. Book him into the semi-final and final. But there are some dangerous names there, and he hasn't got that much tennis in his legs. And there could be a Pack Hunter thing with Sinner. You know, if someone takes his legs a bit in round 3, does that have a knock-on effect? You know, physical matches still worry me a little bit for Sinner. There's that whole thing about him not winning matches over 4 hours, and there are potential tests here. Look, his level might be so good. We called a podcast the other day "Calendar Slam" for post-Pope Sinner. Like, I'm trying not to be
great title.
I'm trying not to be too reactive in the moment, but the draw has given me a little bit of doubt over Sinner that I didn't really have before. But I would still predict him to reach the final.
David, Fonseca's still winning it.
Of course. No, I mean, look, I've slightly had to climb down from that one. But, you know, the tournament hasn't started yet, so he's still got just as much chance as all the other 127 players in the draw, including Carlos Alcaraz. But no, look, I'd be very surprised if Alcaraz doesn't reach the final. Most of my views tally with Matt's. I think Swiatek against Sabalenka as a semi-final is now one I really don't expect to see, given the draw Swiatek has got. And I share the view about Jannik Sinner. I think that top half, really could be any one of 4 or 5 different names that could reach the final, because I'm not convinced Sinner's coming through all those players. I think Draper's got a real shot here. Of getting through to play a Djokovic, for instance, in that bottom section. I just feel like the way it's worked out, Sinner has got the worst of this.
Yeah, don't disagree with any of that, apart from the Fonseca stuff. That's it for part 2. We'll be back with some other bits and bobs, including that shot loss for Zverev in Hamburg in part 3. Welcome back to part 3 of the tennis podcast. Things are winding down here on the penultimate day of qualifying at Roland Garros. The sun is just starting to dip. It's a gorgeous Parisian evening. Just to bring you up to date with a few happenings from events taking place this week. Well, in fact, one big event really. Alexander Zverev, who took that kind of emergency wildcard into Hamburg, lost 7-6 in the third yesterday to Alexandra Müller. It was a match that we watched the latter stages of in the aforementioned very cosy taxi journey from Charles de Gaulle to Boulogne-Billancourt, and it was more of the same from Alexander Zverev, David.
Yeah, he was in charge of the match, having turned it around in the tie-break to lead it 5-3. There was an extraordinary passing shot cross-court with a forehand from Müller that I wasn't entirely sure he knew that much about, but it landed on the line, so good for him. He played some excellent serve and volley stuff, did Müller, but the headline is that Zverev kind of blew it again, and his form goes on. But I think the quotes that we read afterwards were more alarming to my mind than the actual performance. Now, look, he may have been very unwell, and he may have been heroic to have taken to the court at all. That's certainly the sort of the impression that Zverev gives with his quotes, that he said there are only 2 players on the tour, and he didn't name the other one, but I'm pretty sure, given their relationship, it was probably Novak Djokovic. He said there are only 2 players in the world on the ATP Tour who would have taken to the court today, and I'm one of them, given how unwell I was. And so he's sort of writing the narrative there about being incredibly courageous and not being at fault at all for having lost the match. And look, that may actually be true for all I know. He may have had a horrible night, but it doesn't sound great. And it's the latest in a long line of excuses and refusal really to take ownership of the fact that he's playing terribly, and he's done nothing since he got to world number 2. And he's blown his chance of overhauling Jannik Sinner, and frankly, he doesn't look in the mix, in my view, for this tournament. So I guess we'll see. We'll see how he goes in the next few days. 37
times he threw up in the night, apparently.
I mean, 37. That does sound horrible. I mean,
yeah, but why are you
why
taking
did you play?
To court if you've thrown up 37 times? Like, what?
Hannah's reaction to those quotes was incredible. She said, she said, that's his maybe that you were ill, but shouldn't you be alarmed about the fact that nobody could tell you were ill, because that performance and result was so in keeping with your other recent results where you hadn't thrown up 37 times prior. Matteo Berrettini, the curse continues, withdrew today.
Yeah, brutal. He got injured in Rome, didn't he? Had to retire from his match against Casper Ruud, and it's taken him out of Roland Garros as well. And yeah, such a familiar, brutal Berrettini story, really.
In terms of what's happening in Geneva, which of course is where Novak Djokovic is trying to secure a 100th title this week, we watched him beat Martin Fucsovics yesterday, didn't we? He now plays Matteo Arnaldi,
who he lost to in Madrid, so that's going to be an interesting sort of test of whether his form is better than it was.
We also have Norrie against Popperin, quarter-final, Offner, Hashanov, and Hurkacz Fritz is a quarter-final in Geneva. In terms of Hamburg, and who's left in the draw there, Alexander Muller is currently playing his next match, incidentally, against Felix Auger-Aliassime. They're in the warm-up. Winner of that to face Andrei Rublev. And then the semi-finals, as Matt mentioned earlier, Thomas Martin Echeverry doing well in Hamburg. He'll play Flavio Cobolli. I feel like that must be the most back-to-back matches Flavio Cobolli's won in a while.
He did win one title a few weeks back, didn't he? But that was a lower level one.
Yeah.
But...
yeah. I mean,
David's monitoring very closely because
I am.
Member of the fantasy team.
He's in my team. But I actually saw him in Monte Carlo. I was watching. He won a couple there. Then he lost a close one. He looks like he's not that far away from finding the sort of form he did a year ago when we watched that incredible match of his against Holger Rune. But it is difficult backing up that big first season, isn't it? And I think he's found that. I mean, he didn't win a match till about April, so but I hope he comes again. I like to see him doing well.
In terms of the women's events this week, we have the 500 event in Strasbourg, where the quarterfinals are taking place right now. Lyudmila Samsonova is a double break-up on Paula Badosa in a quarterfinal. The winner of that to face either Anna Kalinskaya or Danielle Collins. My app is saying walkover next to that match, but I don't know for who. So there we go. The other semi-final will be Elena Rybakina against Beatriz Haddad-Mayer, and then the final event going on this week is in Rabat, Morocco. And what's happening there? We have Ayla Tomljanovic against Maya Joint in an all-Australian semi-final, and we have Jacqueline Christian finally scoring me some points. She's been a bit of a busted flush for me. She'll take on Camilla Osorio in the semi-finals tomorrow.
It's Anna Kalinskaya who's been forced to withdraw with a right calf injury. She'd just beaten Jessica Pegula in the previous round, and Collins, now into the semis, she'd beaten Emma Raducanu. And there was a bit of an injury concern for Raducanu in that match. She took a medical time out.
The lower back again.
Yeah, so
a real worry.
Factoring that in when we talk about her as part of Swiatek's draw.
We'll keep you updated on those tournaments over the coming days. We're of course back tomorrow. This is the first of 18 daily Roland Garros tennis podcasts.
Yeah.
One last thing to bring your attention on today's show, something called the Mike Dickson Award. Now, the British Tennis Journalists Association, the BTJA, of which the three of us are members, they are launching the annual Mike Dickson Award, giving one person aged between 18 and 24 the chance to be a member of the media for a day at Wimbledon and the Queen's Club this summer. It's the most brilliant opportunity. Like, imagining 18 to 24-year-old me hearing or reading about this, my application could not have gone in quickly enough. And it's a wonderful thing. It's been set up to honour Mike's memory. Mike Dickson, of course, the former tennis correspondent for the Daily Mail that passed away in Australia tragically last year. Really devastating thing to happen, obviously, for his family and for for the British media as well, and he's very much missed. And this is to give a helping hand to those who want to develop a career in journalism and sports journalism, which is something that Mike was really known for, giving that helping and guiding hand. That the first year that I met Mike Dickson, his work experience guy was someone called Alex Kay, who is now Alex K. Jolski, who's head of sport at the BBC. So it's an incredible thing that the BTJA have done. It's an annual award, and it's being supported by the All England Club and the LTA. The winner will receive media accreditation for one day of Wimbledon, the championships at Wimbledon, and one day of the HSBC Championships ATP event at the Queen's Club, with the remit of writing a bylined article on each day for the Wimbledon and LTA websites, which is just brilliant. Applicants must submit a 500-word feature on any tennis-related subject of their choosing, and no more than 250 words explaining why they're entering, including details of present employment or studies and any previous media experience. Entries should be submitted to BTJA Dickson, that's BTJADICKSON, at gmail.com, with all details and copy contained within the body of the email rather than attachments. That's important. And please include your name, date of birth and city or town of residence. The deadline is 11:59 p.m. on the 1st of June 2025, with the winner then chosen by a panel of BTJA committee members, and all applicants will be informed of the outcome on the 5th of June 2025. We just wanted to make listeners aware of that, because we do quite often get people contacting us asking for advice or to be, notified of any opportunities that come up, and it's hard to forge a path in the sports journalism world, and there's no set way into it. There's no training scheme or grad scheme or anything like that. It's a weird and wonderful world, and this sort of opportunity is really priceless. So really do encourage entries if that sounds good to you, or anybody that you might know. And BTJA Dickson at gmail.com is the place to send your entries, and the deadline is 11:59 p.m. UK time on the 1st of June. Best of luck, folks. Hello to our mascots, Phoebe, Maisie and Roger. It's a first Roland Garros for them as our mascots.
Right, Maisie.
Maisie's feeling pretty anxious about the João Fonseca situation now.
She put me up to it.
Sorry, Phoebe, for cheating on you, but I received Roger content yesterday, and
we all did. It was a good day.
Yeah, my heart stopped beating for a moment. Hello to our top folks and executive producers, Greg, Chris and Jeff.
Hey.
Matt, we have some shout-outs.
We do. We have Pauline in Alexandria.
Like Pauline Parmentier.
Very good.
Took the words out of my mouth, David.
and Pauline is also referenced Pauline Betts, who has come up in some Tennis Relived. She's been a sort of adjacent character, like in the Maureen Connolly episode.
Excellent.
Thank you, Pauline.
And Pauline would like to dedicate this shout-out to her Aunt Barb, who she lost this year to cancer. But Aunt Barb was a great tennis player, friend and supporter of other athletes, including her two athletically gifted children, and Pauline says, my own less impressive efforts as a college tennis athlete. That sounds very impressive, Pauline.
Incredibly so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I failed
cheers.
to get on the Nottingham University tennis team, so that impresses me.
So yeah, cheers to Barb.
Cheers to Barb. That's an incredibly lovely tribute, Pauline, and it's touching to choose the Tennis Podcast to do that, so thank you very much.
We've also got Laura Williams from Atlanta, Georgia.
Hello, Laura.
Hi, Laura.
Laura says, I'm pleased to share a name with two entertaining tennis Lauras, Robson and Siegemund.
Entertaining in different ways, Laura.
Great stuff.
I've got cousins with the surname Williams. One of them is called William Williams. He goes by Bill.
Thanks for being a friend, Laura.
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, up to you whether you want to be Robson or Siegman. Different folks, different strokes.
And finally, we've got Faye Futter, who is from London originally, but now lives in Michigan.
Oh, hello,
Hi,
Faye.
Faye.
Bit like Matt Futterman.
Literally the first part of his surname.
Yeah,
Yeah, who we had a lovely time with today.
lovely chat with earlier. Filled me in on his daughter's love life. Very invested in that.
He is as well.
And do we know anything about Faye? Because I don't think I know any tennis Fays.
Well, we know that she is halfway to her career slam.
Yes, Faye.
She's attended Wimbledon and the US Open. Lots of other tournaments as well, but she is missing the French and the Australian Open.
That's good to be halfway through, I think, isn't it? You've had some great experiences, but you've also got a lot to look forward to.
Yeah.
Yeah, good
Yeah.
place to be, Faye.
Yeah. Keep us posted on your progress, Faye. I hope you make it to Roland Garros and Melbourne at some point.
Also the proud owner of an English Springer Spaniel called Jasper. I should have led with that, shouldn't I?
Great dog. I know another Springer Spaniel called Jasper. There we go. Thank you, Faye. Thank you very much to all of our friends of the Tennis Podcast. If you'd like to become a friend of the Tennis Podcast, it gets you lots of things, access to all of our bonus episodes. We do a live episode every month. Every month we do 8 episodes of Tennis Relived every year. It also gets you access to The Barge, our incredible community platform, which is always rocking throughout any Grand Slam. And it gets you ad-free listening of all of our episodes of the show, which has gone down very well. So the link, if you'd like to become a friend of the pod, is in our show notes. And also just a heads up that every episode of the Tennis Podcast will now be available on YouTube, as well as every other podcast provider. We are increasingly aware that YouTube is kind of a one-stop shop for a lot of people, particularly the young people, David, because we're very in touch with the youth here on the Tennis Podcast. So if that's your preferred platform for listening to the pod, then you can now enjoy the Tennis Podcast on YouTube all the time, not just our live shows. So exciting times.
Smash that like button.
Smash that like and subscribe button, folks. The Tennis Podcast is proudly part of the Athletic Podcast Network. This is the first of 18 daily podcasts recorded on site in Paris, 1 down, 17 to go. Thanks for listening, and we'll speak to you tomorrow.